Fleet Admiral Kim Woo-shik stood on the bridge of the human flagship Incheon as it approached the Vaxari homeworld. The massive alien planet hung in space like a gray, wounded giant, surrounded by the remnants of what had once been the galaxy's most feared fleet. 5 months of war had ended, not with total destruction, but with something no one had expected. The Vaxari Empire had surrendered, but their message had shocked every species in the galaxy. They were not just giving up. They were asking humans to teach them how to live differently. The surrender ceremony took place aboard the Incheon in a conference room that had been hastily converted for the historic moment. Commander Thekvar, once the proud leader of Vaxari conquest, forces now looked broken and confused as he faced Admiral Kim Woo-shik. "We surrender our empire to human authority," Thekvar said in a voice that shook with uncertainty. "But we do not understand what comes next. Every species we conquered either served us or was destroyed. What will you do with us?" Admiral Kim Woo-shik looked at the alien commander with calm eyes. "We will give you something your people have never experienced before, a chance to learn a better way to live. You will face trials for your war crimes, but even your worst criminals will receive quick, painless deaths after fair judgment. This is what humans call justice." The terms of surrender spread across the galaxy within hours. Instead of enslaving the Vaxari or forcing them into labor camps, humans offered rehabilitation and education. War criminals would face human justice systems, but even they would be treated with dignity. Commander Yu Ji-hoon was placed in charge of the former Vaxari territories. His first order shocked both humans and aliens alike. All torture facilities were to be converted into hospitals and schools. All prisoners, regardless of species, were to receive immediate medical care and counseling. The work was not easy. Many Vaxari could not understand why humans would help their former enemies. Some tried to return to their old ways of cruelty and had to be stopped. But slowly, something remarkable began to happen. Young Vaxari, who had grown up knowing only violence, began to learn about concepts like kindness and mercy. On the Vaxari homeworld, a creature who had once been called General Morthek approached Commander Yu Ji-hoon with a request that would have been impossible under the old system. "I wish to take a human name," he said quietly. "I want to be called Peaceseeker because your people taught me that strength comes from ending suffering, not causing it." This was the first time in galactic history that a member of a conquered species had voluntarily adopted the culture of their conquerors, not from fear but from genuine desire to change. The story spread across dozens of worlds, inspiring other former Vaxari to make similar requests. Dr. Jung Eun-hee became Earth's first ambassador to the reformed Vaxari Republic, working with former warriors to understand human concepts of compassion and mercy. Her job was unlike anything in diplomatic history, teaching an entire species how to value life instead of suffering. The changes were not limited to Vaxari space. The Galactic Council voted unanimously to adopt human military protocols, including the Mercy Doctrine, which stated that enemy combatants should be defeated quickly and efficiently without unnecessary suffering. Death in battle became seen as an honorable end rather than shameful defeat. Species across the galaxy began changing their military training. Young soldiers from dozens of different worlds learned human concepts about fighting to protect rather than fighting to dominate. The idea that true victory meant helping your enemies find peace rather than keeping them in pain became the new standard. Captain Oh Sung-min, grandson of one of the original human defenders, now patrolled the peaceful borders between human and former Vaxari space. His grandfather had fought in the first battles when the aliens still believed torture was strength. Now both species worked together to maintain peace. He often thought about the lessons his grandfather had taught him before the old man died. "True strength is not about how much pain you can cause your enemies," his grandfather had said. "True strength is about how much pain you can prevent." The patrol ship passed a space station where human and former Vaxari engineers worked side by side, building new medical facilities for the outer colonies. Children from both species played together in the station's recreation areas, learning each other's languages and customs. On dozens of worlds throughout the galaxy, integrated schools taught the principle that had become universal law. In war we fight to win, in victory we choose mercy, in death we grant peace. These words were spoken in hundreds of different languages, but the meaning was always the same. The transformation was not complete overnight. Some species still struggled with concepts of merciful warfare. Some former Vaxari still had nightmares about the cruelty they had once considered normal. But progress was being made across the galaxy. The most dramatic example came when a group of young beings from 12 different species formed the first Galactic Peace Corps. Their mission was to travel to worlds experiencing conflict and teach the human principles of merciful resolution rather than total destruction. Peace Seeker, who had once been the Vaxari torturer, General Morthek became the organization's first non-human leader. His speech at the founding ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy. "I spent my life believing that causing pain made me strong," he said to the assembled crowd of young beings from many worlds. "But humans taught me that anyone can hurt someone who is helpless. Real strength is having the power to cause suffering and choosing not to use it. Real strength is ending conflict rather than prolonging it." The ceremony was held on Earth in the same city where Admiral Kim Tae-ho had first declared that humans would grant their enemies the mercy of dying only once. Now that same principle had become the foundation of galactic civilization. Captain Oh Sung-min received a transmission from Earth Command informing him that the last Vaxari Rehabilitation Center had graduated its final class. Every former member of the torture regime had either learned new ways of thinking or had chosen quick, painless execution over attempting to return to their old methods. The war that had begun with first contact between humans and Vaxari had ended with something unprecedented in galactic history. An entire civilization had been transformed, not through conquest or destruction, but through the power of mercy and compassion. Children across the galaxy now grew up learning that conflict should end suffering, not cause it. That true victory meant helping former enemies find peace. That the strongest choice was often the most merciful one. The galaxy had learned that Earth's greatest weapon was not advanced technology or superior tactics. It was the revolutionary idea that even the worst enemies deserved the dignity of a quick death rather than prolonged suffering. And from that simple concept of mercy had grown a new way of thinking that changed everything. Peace was not just the absence of war, it was the presence of compassion. And humanity had taught the galaxy that this was the strongest foundation any civilization could build upon. Reporter Kang Do-hyun floated in zero gravity aboard the neutral space station that housed the Galactic Information Network. His job was to document the war between humans and Vaxari for the dozens of alien species across the galaxy who were watching the conflict with growing amazement. For 3 months he had been recording footage that no one believed possible. The humans were not just fighting the galaxy's most feared torturers, they were changing them. The Vaxari Empire that had terrorized 47 star systems was cracking apart from the inside. Do-hyun activated his recording equipment and began his latest report. "This is Kang Do-hyun reporting from the Nexus station. What we are witnessing may be the most important event in galactic history. The human species has introduced concepts of warfare that are completely unknown to the rest of us." He had footage from 17 different battles showing human soldiers granting quick deaths to wounded enemies. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. Most species either ran from the Vaxari or fought them with equal cruelty. But humans did something that seemed impossible. They fought with restraint. The report showed Ambassador Park Young-suk addressing the Galactic Council on the neutral world of Centauri Prime. She stood before representatives of 30 different species, many of whom had lost worlds to Vaxari conquest. "We do not fight to torture our enemies," she said calmly. "We fight to protect what we love. When we kill cleanly and quickly because we understand that death can be either punishment or mercy, and we choose mercy." The Zelani representative, a species that looked like walking crystals, spoke first. "Your people grant mercy to those who have shown no mercy to others. How is this logical, Park?" Young-suk looked at the assembled aliens with patience, because mercy is not about what our enemies deserve. It is about who we choose to be. We could torture Vaxari prisoners the way they tortured our people. But if we did that, we would become the very thing we are fighting against. The Caraxian delegate, whose people had been enslaved by the Vaxari for 2 decades, asked the question everyone was thinking. But how does showing mercy to your enemies help you win the war? The answer came from General Huang Subin, who had joined the meeting via subspace communication from the front lines. Because mercy is not weakness, it is strength. Every Vaxari soldier who sees us grant honorable death to their comrades begins to question their own methods. Every alien who learns that we treat prisoners with dignity starts to wonder if there might be a better way to live. The general's words were broadcast across the galaxy and caused immediate reactions. On the Caraxian homeworld, enslaved beings who had given up hope began to whisper about the humans who fought with honor. On Zelani crystal worlds, the inhabitants began discussing concepts of merciful warfare that they had never considered. Captain Seo Min-jun was leading rescue operations on former Vaxari prison worlds where thousands of beings from dozens of species had been tortured for years. What shocked the galaxy was not just that humans were freeing these prisoners, but how they treated the Vaxari guards they encountered. When Min-jun's forces found wounded alien guards, they provided medical treatment and pain relief before granting quick deaths. The rescued prisoners from other species could not understand this behavior. They expected humans to torture the Vaxari in revenge. Why do you help them die peacefully? Asked a Caraxian survivor whose own people had been tortured by these same guards for decades. They caused us years of suffering. Min-jun knelt beside a dying Vaxari guard and administered pain medication as he spoke. Because if we become torturers to fight torturers, we lose what makes us human. The guard looked up at him with confusion and something that might have been gratitude before Min-jun ended his life with a single clean shot. The footage of these rescues spread across galactic networks, causing unprecedented reactions. Species that had survived Vaxari attacks by hiding or running suddenly realized that someone was fighting back, not with greater cruelty, but with principles they had forgotten existed. On the Thraxian homeworld, an ancient species known for their wisdom called an emergency council meeting. The humans fight a war we did not know was possible, said their eldest leader. They destroy their enemies while keeping their souls intact. Similar discussions were happening on worlds across the galaxy. The concept of honorable warfare had not existed for thousands of years. Most species fought either to completely destroy their enemies or to avoid fighting at all. The humans were demonstrating a third path, fighting with restraint and mercy. The psychological impact on the Vaxari was becoming clear through intercepted communications. Their military was fracturing. As soldiers began refusing torture assignments, some Vaxari units had actually helped human prisoners escape. Others had requested to be transferred away from interrogation duties. Commander Thekvar sent increasingly desperate messages to other Vaxari leaders. The humans have infected our forces with their strange ideas about mercy. Half my soldiers now question whether causing pain makes us strong. Several have actually asked for honorable execution rather than face traditional punishment for failure. The infection was spreading beyond the military. On Vaxari civilian worlds, beings who had never questioned their society's values began having discussions about the human concept of merciful death. Some started showing kindness to prisoners and slaves' behavior that had been unknown in their culture for generations. Dr. Han So-young was now working with the Galactic Council to document these changes. Her research showed that human values were spreading like a virus through species that had contact with the war. Every alien who witnessed human mercy began questioning their own approaches to conflict. The most dramatic example came from the Vorthak Empire, a species almost as cruel as the Vaxari. Their military leaders sent a message to human forces offering to exchange prisoners according to human protocols rather than their own traditional methods. This was the first time in galactic history that a species had voluntarily adopted more merciful warfare practices. Young Vaxari soldiers captured by human forces were returned to their own lines after being treated with medical care and respect. Many of these soldiers spread stories about human kindness that undermined Vaxari propaganda about enemy cruelty. The concept of honorable treatment for prisoners became a topic of discussion even among civilian populations. The war was changing the entire galaxy in ways no one had expected. Species that had been enemies for centuries began negotiating truces based on human principles of merciful conflict resolution. The idea that strength could be shown through restraint rather than brutality was revolutionary. Ambassador Park Young-suk received messages from 17 different species asking for human advisors to help them understand concepts like honorable warfare and merciful victory. These were ideas that most galactic civilizations had never encountered. The final shock came when a group of Vaxari civilians sent a message directly to Earth asking for teachers who could help them understand human philosophy about mercy and compassion. This was unprecedented in galactic history, a conquered species asking their conquerors for moral guidance. As the fourth month of war began, it was clear that the conflict had become about much more than territory or resources. The humans were fighting for the soul of galactic civilization, showing that it was possible to be strong without being cruel to win, without becoming monsters. The galaxy would never be the same because 30 billion humans had refused to abandon their principles even when facing the cruelest enemies imaginable. They had proven that mercy was not weakness, but the ultimate expression of strength. Colonel Nam Jun-ki sat in his office at Earth Strategic Command, surrounded by screens showing battle reports from 12 different star systems. The war had been going on for 2 months, and something strange was happening. The Vaxari Empire was beginning to crack from the inside. He had been studying alien psychology and warfare for his entire career. But the Vaxari were different from anything humans had encountered before. They built their entire civilization on the idea that prolonged suffering was strength and quick death was weakness. Now they were facing humans who turned that philosophy upside down. Nam Jun-ki opened a communication channel to all human forces across the galaxy. This is Colonel Nam with new orders. We are going to try something that has never been done before. We are going to teach our enemies about mercy through words as well as actions. The plan was simple but revolutionary. Human forces would broadcast poetry, philosophy, and literature about death and mercy across all occupied systems. The aliens would hear human thoughts about peaceful endings, honorable death, and merciful release concepts that did not exist in Vaxari culture. On the front lines, Major Lee Hyejin served as both a combat officer and a military chaplain. She had been captured 3 days ago during a raid on a Vaxari supply depot, but instead of being tortured, she found herself in a strange situation. The aliens wanted to talk to her about human beliefs, the Vaxari. Interrogator was a creature called Morthek, who had been studying human prisoners for weeks. Unlike other aliens, this one seemed genuinely confused rather than cruel. "Why do your soldiers pray before battle?" he asked. "Do they pray for victory, Lee?" Hyejin looked at him calmly. "No. We pray for strength to do what is right and for mercy for our enemies. We ask for the courage to grant clean deaths rather than cruel ones." This made no sense to Morthek. In his species, prayers were for causing maximum pain to enemies and for surviving long enough to see them suffer. Why would anyone pray for their enemies' well-being? Because Lee Hyejin explained every species you have conquered feared the pain you would inflict, but we humans learned to fear inflicting unnecessary pain on others. We kill you quickly not because we are weak but because we are strong enough to choose mercy even for our enemies. She began reciting human poetry about death and rest words that had been written by soldiers in previous wars. Sleep eternal, where no pain can reach you. Rest in peace beyond all earthly suffering. These were concepts completely alien to the Vaxari, who saw death as ultimate failure. Meanwhile, the broadcast campaign was having unexpected effects across Vaxari space. Human voices read poetry about gentle endings and peaceful rest. The aliens heard human philosophy about the difference between justice and revenge, about mercy being stronger than cruelty. On the Vaxari homeworld, Commander Thekvar received reports that disturbed him deeply. Some of his own soldiers were beginning to question their methods. A group of warriors had actually requested quick execution rather than face the traditional punishment for losing a battle. This was unheard of in Vaxari history. The infection spread through their military ranks. Human prisoners taught Vaxari guards about concepts like honorable death and merciful endings. Some aliens began to understand that there might be strength in choosing compassion over cruelty. These ideas were like a virus destroying the foundation of Vaxari civilization. General Huang Subin led the human counterattack against the Vaxari fleet above their homeworld. But instead of using overwhelming firepower, she sent a message to the alien leadership. This is General Huang Subin of the Earth Defense Forces. We offer you a choice that no species has ever given you before. Cease your torture practices across the galaxy. Accept trials for your war criminals with quick, painless executions for the guilty, and we will help you rebuild your civilization. Or continue your current ways and face something worse than death, being left alive to think about all the cruelty you have caused while the rest of the galaxy learns the mercy we have shown. The message caused chaos among the Vaxari High Command. They had never been offered terms that included mercy for their own people. Other species either submitted completely or fought to mutual destruction. Humans were offering a third option: redemption through accepting different values on occupied worlds. Vaxari soldiers began experiencing something they had no words for. Some started having nightmares about the enemies they had tortured. Others began questioning whether causing pain really made them strong. A few even began showing mercy to human prisoners, an act that would have been punishable by death in their own society. Dr. Han So-young had been rescued and was now working with human psychological warfare specialists. She created recordings that were broadcast to Vaxari forces across the galaxy. You believe that making others suffer proves your strength, she said. But think about this. It takes no strength to hurt someone who cannot fight back. Real strength is having the power to cause pain and choosing not to use it. Real strength is ending someone's suffering rather than prolonging it. The recordings included human music about rest and peace, stories about soldiers who chose mercy over revenge, and philosophical discussions about why death could be a gift rather than a punishment. These concepts spread through Vaxari ranks like wildfire. Captain Im Hyun-jung was now leading liberation efforts on former Vaxari prison worlds. When her forces found alien guards who had shown mercy to human prisoners, she made sure they received quick, painless deaths rather than being turned over to vengeful former prisoners. This confused both humans and aliens, but it demonstrated the consistency of human values. We do not become monsters to fight monsters, she explained to her soldiers. We show mercy because that is who we are, not because our enemies deserve it. The philosophy was working on 17 different worlds. Vaxari soldiers had refused orders to torture prisoners. Some had even helped human captives escape. Others had requested transfer away from interrogation duties. These actions were spreading panic through the alien command structure back on Earth. Admiral Kim Tae-ho received a transmission that made him smile. A group of Vaxari officers had sent a message asking for terms of surrender. But more importantly, they had asked for human teachers to help them understand concepts like mercy and honorable conduct. The war was far from over, but something fundamental had changed. The Vaxari Empire was no longer fighting just human soldiers. They were fighting human ideas about compassion, mercy, and the strength it takes to choose kindness over cruelty. Young Vaxari soldiers, who had never known anything but torture and pain, were learning that there might be another way to live. Some were beginning to understand that true strength came from protecting the weak, rather than exploiting them, from ending suffering rather than causing it. The galaxy was about to witness something unprecedented, an entire warrior civilization questioning its most basic beliefs about power and cruelty, all because they had encountered a species that considered mercy to be strength rather than weakness. The human way of thinking was spreading, and it would change everything. 3 weeks after first contact, Lieutenant Colonel Yoon Sung-ho crouched behind the twisted remains of a hover car on the occupied world of New Seoul. The Vaxari had taken the planet in just 2 days, but they were learning that holding human territory was much harder than conquering it. His special operations team of 12 soldiers had been dropped behind enemy lines with one mission: make the aliens regret ever coming to human space. Around them, the city burned from fighting, but the real war was just beginning. The Vaxari thought they understood warfare, but they had never faced humans who fought by different rules. Sung-ho watched through his scope as alien patrols moved through the streets, dragging human prisoners toward their mobile torture facilities. The Vaxari had set up these centers in every captured city expecting to break human resistance through fear and pain. But something was going wrong with their usual methods. Across the city in a Vaxari interrogation facility, Dr. Han So-young sat strapped to a medical table. The aliens had captured her 2 days ago and begun their standard procedure. They tortured prisoners for information, then used their advanced healing technology to repair the damage. Then they started over again and again until the victim's mind shattered. But Han So-young was not breaking the way other species did. Every time the aliens revived her after torture, she tried to find ways to kill herself. She bit her tongue trying to bleed out. She held her breath until she passed out. She even tried to stop her own heart through meditation techniques. The Vaxari were baffled by a prisoner who kept trying to die rather than live in pain. The alien medical technician called Zekran stood over her with confusion in his black eyes. "Why do you keep trying to end your existence? Most species beg us to stop the pain and promise to serve our empire. You act like death is better than life, Han." So-young looked at him with tired but determined eyes because death is a mercy that ends suffering. "You think keeping me alive to hurt me over and over makes you powerful. But all it proves is that you do not understand what real strength looks like." She had prepared for this moment. During her military psychology training, every human soldier knew they might be captured and tortured. The key was to remember that death was not the enemy, prolonged suffering was. The aliens could hurt her body, but they could not make her afraid of dying, because humans had learned that sometimes death was the kindest option. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Colonel Yoon Sung-ho led his team through the underground tunnels beneath New Seoul. They had been observing Vaxari tactics for days and noticed something important. The aliens expected their enemies to capture prisoners for interrogation just like they did, but humans had a different approach to warfare. When Sung-ho's team encountered a Vaxari patrol, they did not try to take prisoners. They eliminated the enemy quickly and efficiently using precise shots that killed instantly. The few alien survivors they found wounded were given medical attention and pain relief before being granted quick deaths. This was not cruelty. It was human military doctrine. Sergeant Major Choi Min-ho was the team's senior non-commissioned officer and had fought in 3 different wars before the aliens arrived. He understood that the way humans treated their enemies said something important about who they were as a species. "Sir," he whispered to Sung-ho as they prepared to ambush another patrol. "The wounded alien we found earlier kept asking why we gave him medicine before killing him. He could not understand why we would ease his pain if we were going to end his life anyway." Sung-ho nodded. "Because we are not monsters, Min-ho. We kill when we must, but we do not make others suffer unnecessarily. The aliens think torture makes them strong, but mercy requires much more strength." Ambush went perfectly. 6 Vaxari soldiers eliminated in under 10 seconds with no human casualties, but as they prepared to move on, they heard something that made them pause. One alien was still alive but badly wounded, crying out in his own language. According to human military protocols, they should have finished him quickly, but Choi Min-ho knelt beside the alien and administered a painkiller from his medical kit. The creature looked up at him with shock and confusion as the agony faded from his body. "Why?" the alien gasped in broken human language. "Why do you help me before you kill me?" "Because," Choi Min-ho replied, "you are going to die and no one should die in pain if we can prevent it. This is what humans call mercy." The alien's eyes widened as if he had heard something impossible. Then Choi Min-ho ended his life with a single precise shot. No suffering, no prolonged agony, just a clean death that released the enemy from his wounds. News of these encounters spread through the Vaxari forces like a disease. Soldiers who had always feared capture and torture now faced an enemy that promised something they had never experienced: quick death instead of endless pain. Some aliens began to find this concept more terrifying than traditional torture. Captain Im Hyun-jung commanded a boarding party that attacked a Vaxari supply ship. Her Marines fought with brutal efficiency, clearing deck after deck of enemy resistance. But when they cornered the last group of alien defenders, she did something no Vaxari commander had ever experienced. "You have 2 choices," she announced to the trapped aliens: "surrender, and we will execute you quickly and painlessly, or continue fighting and die in battle. Either way, Your suffering ends today. We do not torture prisoners, and we do not make death last longer than necessary. The alien commander stared at her in disbelief. You offer us death as a gift. Why would we surrender if you will kill us anyway? Because Im Hyun-jung explained. There is a difference between dying, afraid and in pain, and dying with dignity. We respect our enemies enough to grant them an honorable end. The concept was so foreign to the Vaksari that several of them began arguing among themselves. They had spent their entire lives in a culture where death was shameful and prolonged suffering was considered normal. Now they faced enemies who treated death as something that could be granted with compassion. Back on the planet's surface, Dr. Han So-young had been rescued by Seung-ho's teams. The Vaksari facility was destroyed, but not before she managed to record a message for any aliens who might find it. You think making us suffer forever is power, she said into the recording device. But we humans learned long ago that forcing someone to live in agony is the greatest cruelty. We kill our enemies quickly because we know what real mercy looks like. When you torture someone, you prove you are weak. When you grant them a clean death, you prove you are strong enough to choose compassion, even for those who hurt you. The recording was transmitted across Vaksari communication networks where it confused and disturbed alien commanders. They had conquered dozens of species but never encountered one that treated death as a gift rather than a punishment. The human way of war was unlike anything in their experience. As the second month of fighting began, Vaksari High Command received reports that made no sense. Human forces were not trying to capture aliens for information. They killed enemy soldiers efficiently and treated wounded enemies with medical care before ending their lives quickly. Some Vaksari troops were even beginning to request execution rather than medical treatment when badly wounded. Commander Thekvar found himself facing a strategic problem he had never encountered before. How do you fight an enemy that offers mercy instead of cruelty? How do you terrorize a species that considers death to be kindness? The humans were changing the rules of war in ways that made the Vaksari's greatest weapons useless. The galaxy was about to learn that Earth's most dangerous weapon was not superior technology or ruthless tactics. It was the revolutionary idea that even enemies deserve to die with dignity rather than suffer endlessly. Captain Lee Dong-min stood on the bridge of the Aegis watching the stars through the massive view screen. His hands gripped the metal railing as he studied the sensor readings that made no sense. 3 days ago, Earth Command had detected strange ships moving toward the outer colonies. Now those same ships hung in space like metal monsters waiting to strike. The communication officer turned toward him with wide eyes. Captain, we are receiving a transmission from the unknown vessels. The voice crackled through static, but the words were clear in broken human language. We are the Vaksari Empire. You will surrender your worlds to us, or face consequences beyond your understanding. Lee Dong-min had served in the Earth Defense Fleet for 15 years. He had fought pirates and rebels but never faced true aliens. The first contact protocol seemed useless now as he stared at the alien ships that looked like twisted metal spines covered in weapons. Open a channel, he ordered. The main screen flickered and showed a creature that made several crew members step backward. The alien had gray skin stretched tight over sharp bones. Its eyes were completely black, and its mouth held too many teeth. When it spoke, its voice sounded like grinding. Metal, I am Commander Thekvar of the Vaksari Warfleet. Your species will submit to our empire as all others have done. We do not destroy worlds quickly. We take prisoners and make them tell us everything they know. Then we heal them and make them tell us again. We do this until their minds break and they become our servants. Lee. Dongmin felt cold sweat on his forehead but kept his voice steady. We are humans from Earth. We do not surrender to threats. If you want our worlds, you will have to fight for them. The alien creature made a sound that might have been laughter. Your species does not understand. We have conquered 47 star systems. The beings there learned that death is not the worst thing that can happen to them. We keep our enemies alive for years, making them suffer until they beg to serve us. You will learn this lesson too. The transmission ended, and Lee Dong-min turned to his crew. The weapons officer looked pale but ready. The navigation officer was already plotting. escape routes. But the captain knew there was no running from this. The aliens had come to human space and they would learn what humans were made of. Meanwhile, at the mining colony on Kepler 442b, Commander Park Ji-woo received the same transmission. As every other human outpost, the aliens wanted surrender. But she had spent her whole life on this rock building something worth protecting. The miners were not soldiers, but they were humans, and humans did not give up without a fight. Ji-woo gathered her small security team in the colony command center. "We have maybe 6 hours before they reach us," she told them. "The aliens think we will surrender because other species did. They do not know humans very well." Her second in command was a young man named Bae Ho-seok who had joined the colony guard only 2 months ago. "Commander, what did they mean about keeping prisoners alive and torturing them?" Ji-woo had studied the alien transmission recordings. The Vaxari were worse than any human tyrant. From history, they did not just kill their enemies, they broke them completely, keeping them alive to suffer over and over until death would be a mercy. But humans understood mercy in ways these aliens clearly did not, back on Earth. Admiral Kim Tae-ho sat in the war room deep beneath Seoul Command Center. The alien transmission had been broadcast to every human world, and the response was the same: everywhere, humans would fight. These creatures thought torture was strength, but they had never faced a species that considered quick death to be kindness. Kim Tae-ho had been born during the resource wars when humans fought each other over water and rare metals. He had seen what people could do to each other when they lost their humanity. But he had also seen humans choose mercy even for their worst enemies, giving clean deaths instead of slow suffering. The aliens did not understand this concept, and that would be their mistake. The Admiral opened a channel to all human military commanders across known space. "This is Admiral Kim Tae-ho speaking to all Earth Defense Forces. The aliens called Vaxari have declared war on humanity. They believe torture makes them strong, but they are about to learn something about human warfare. We fight to win, not to cause suffering. We kill our enemies quickly and cleanly because we know the difference between justice and cruelty." He paused, looking at the faces of commanders on screens around the galaxy. "When we capture enemy soldiers, we will not torture them for information. We will treat them according to human military law. If they must die, they will die once and only once. This is not weakness. This is the strength that separates us from monsters." The first battle began at the mining colony. Commander Park Ji-woo watched alien ships descend through the atmosphere like falling stars. Her miners had been given every weapon the colony could spare. Old mining lasers, jury-rigged pulse rifles, and demolition charges meant for asteroid work. Vaxari soldiers that emerged from their ships looked like their commander, but carried weapons that hummed with unknown energy. They expected the humans to run or surrender, as other species had done. Instead, they met fierce resistance from beings who fought like cornered animals. When the first group of aliens tried to capture a wounded human miner, they discovered something that shocked them. The human activated a grenade, killing himself and 3 Vaxari soldiers the aliens had never encountered, a species that chose death over capture. They could not understand why anyone would prefer to die rather than live as prisoners. More human defenders made the same choice across the battlefield. Wounded soldiers triggered self-destruct devices rather than be taken alive. Healthy fighters charged alien positions with explosive packs knowing they would not survive. The Vaxari had never seen anything like this level of commitment to death over capture. Commander Thek Var received confused reports from his ground forces. The humans were not fighting like other species. They did not retreat when facing superior numbers. They did not surrender when offered terms. They seemed to prefer death to living under alien rule. This made no sense to a species that used fear of prolonged suffering as their primary weapon. Hours later, Admiral Kim Tae-ho received the alien commander's second transmission. This time, the creature looked less confident. "Human. Admiral, your species fights strangely. Your soldiers choose death over capture. This is foolish behavior. Why do they not fear what we could do to them as prisoners?" Kim Tae-ho smiled grimly as he prepared his response. "Because, Commander, we learned long ago that there are worse things than death. We grant our enemies the mercy of dying only once. You should fear this kindness because it means we are not afraid of you. The alien's black eyes seem to widen in confusion. Mercy. Death is mercy. This makes no sense to us, that Kim Tae-ho replied, is exactly the problem. The transmission ended and the war between humans and Vaxari began in earnest. The aliens thought they were fighting another weak species that feared pain and suffering. Instead, they had encountered beings who considered quick death to be an act of compassion and who would fight to ensure their enemies received that same mercy, rather than prolonged torment. The stage was set for a conflict unlike any the galaxy had ever seen.